as are we, from so many different parts of his life. He had his McQuantico life. He actually had a life before McQuantico, but I'm not familiar with that, and I don't think anyone else is either.
We were hoping somebody could fill that in on the timeline, but unfortunately.
So his McQuantico phase, his Madison phase, his Fort phase, his later more difficult phase, also at Fort. And I am Kitty. I'm Kitty Vogt. Phil is from McQuantico. I'm not really from McQuantico. For the purposes of this event, I'm from McQuantico. My sisters grew up with him. There's other McQuantico friends here, which is great. I hope some of them maybe share a story, but I know they've been sharing stories amongst each other. Oh, and here's one of our guests of honor, Olivia. Let me just refer a little bit to our notes. Where's Carl?
He's right
Where's he? So anyway, if Carl were standing here, but he's not.
Do you want to stand up here?
We'd still say.
Do I have to?
Yes. So we were Team Phil.
Nucleus.
Nucleus of Team Phil. Thank you, Carol.
Yeah.
That's exactly accurate.
Hey, talking tonight.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. We, in a certain fashion, managed Phil's life for the last few years with a ton of help from some people in this room, his major caregivers. And do you want to interview me?
We have Olivia, lovely Olivia, one of Phil's best friends. Okay.
Yeah. There you are. But you have to also turn it on.
Okay. Okay, it works. Olivia, who is one of Phil's best friends, caregiver extraordinaire. Thank you so much for everything you did for Phil.
It's truly a pleasure.
Mary, are you here? Mary Grigson?
Couldn't have left, did you?
No,
Yeah.
she's here.
I was right here.
Oh, we just want to acknowledge your steadfastness, the information you gave us, your caring of Phil. Just, you always manage to help us through the most difficult times. Thank you.
Are either of you want to share stories, Olivia?
I'd love
Okay, so let me just do something more, but I'd like you, and Mary, if you are going to say anything, please do that. But now we need to introduce Carolyn and Carl.
Okay. I'm certain that most of you do not know me. I met Phil here in 1989, and we were together off and on for decades. A dear man. What I do want to tell you is, I probably know a lot about each of you. Phil was a storyteller extraordinaire, and I'm looking forward to memories because I want to see how accurate his stories were. Maybe it'll be memory, I don't know. So, I'll let Carl go.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Well, first of all, I know this memorial is for Phil Ball, but I wanted to mention that our comrade, brother, Henry Haslick, died this last spring. And there wasn't an obituary in Madison papers, so I don't know if any of you know that, but he was a good friend. We actually developed a windmill apparatus together, which he got a patent on. But we want to remember Phil with Hank Haslick. So.
Another Francis Court denizen.
Right.
For those of you who know about Francis
Yeah.
Court.
He and BJ Nicole lived in number 8 at Francis Court, and we lived in number 7.
Nicole's artwork is on the wall here.
I didn't know that.
You're looking.
Well, anyways, I'm going to tell you a quick memory. You know, there's so many memories of Phil. Seem to intersect my life like 1,000 different ways. But I first met Phil at the First Congregational Church in Madison. And I had gone there because it was going to be a sanctuary for, I think, Ken Vogel, for a drought resistor. And I went there to evaluate, how real this thing was. And anyways, I met Phil there, and he recruited me to do work with the start the Madison Tenants Union. So we worked together. I didn't do a lot, but Phil was a great organizer. And then I think all of you know my quote difficulties.
Don't talk about it.
And Phil was instrumental in, providing me with support. And many of you in the room also provided me with support. I can't thank you enough. After my kind of coming out party, it was at Phil's home. He hosted the party. And I remember Phil getting down on the piano and playing classical music piece. Little did I know that was the only one he knew. But he played it beautifully. And then after that, I had broken up with a girlfriend, very amicable breakup, but I went to live with Phil at Francis Court, and lived there for 4 or 5 years with Phil. And the one thing I can always say about Phil, he was always, whenever I would greet him, he would give me a cheerful hi, and he was always so happy to see you. I just found it amazing, especially, I'm kind of a curmudgeon myself, but I found that rather unusual. And he was just he was basically my counselor. I got free counsel from Phil, and of course I gave him a few counsel. It was at that time that he was working on MATC and trying to get it on East Washington Avenue, primarily to promote density in the city. And actually what you see there now at East Washington Avenue, the density that you have there, at that time it was like a bunch of car lots. And really ugly way to come into a capital city. And you wanted MATC there on East Washington, and I knew it didn't have a snowball's chance in hell because, we're a car culture. And many of the students, came from outside the city, and everybody wants cars to get to where they wanted to go. And they really didn't want to drive into the city. So, he made a valiant effort to locate it there. I think it would have been a great thing. And then, Phil was also involved with, promoting the building of a convention center in Madison. And later, he brewed the idea because of the millions of dollars that, the city was putting into the convention center, losing money on the convention center, such that one time he didn't propose this exactly, but he thought it should be renamed the Frank Lloyd Wright Casino. Bring a casino in Madison. So at least, the people in the city of Madison weren't, paying out big bucks to keep it open. When I first went to Francis Court, I said, oh, well, this is going to be home for me, because the first sight I saw was Phil had his BMW in the living room, half dismantled. I said, this is my kind of guy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Francis Court. It's now where the coal center is in Madison. There's 8 row houses. We lived in number 7. Kitty, where did you?
Number 2,
No,
and there's
number 2.
residents from number 1 here.
Okay. And Hank and BJ, of course, lived in number 8. And, you know, Francis Court was like the site for Red Stripe. And they actually, maybe Kitty could talk about that for a second.
I don't think we actually need to talk about it, but we did win, so that. Carolyn had some other things to say. I don't know why I'm in love with this quote from somebody. So I just want to share it. Somebody, people were sending notes to us via e-bike. And one of his friends said, Phil had a most enjoyable intelligence that he was always willing to share.
All I wanted to say is I forgot, am I on?
Am I on? No, I am. Okay. I apologize to Paul. He was also one of Phil's caregivers and would let Phil win in arm wrestling every time. Every time. And I think what I would like to do is share my memory now. It's very simple. When I was still working, I would have to get up at 5 in the morning, if not earlier. And every morning, Phil would wake me up with a freshly brewed cup of coffee. And it just, to me, it just speaks volumes about his thoughtfulness and his kindness and how he knew how to care for people. That's mine.
So we'll open it up now, but Olivia and Mary, if you would like to speak, would you prefer seated or coming up?
I'll sit if that's okay.
I'll bring you that microphone. This is Olivia Huerta,
Somebody sweat.
Princess.
Thank you so much.
Just put it by your
Just
mouth.
see if it's on.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I wrote this a while back. I spent about 1.5 years as Phil's buddy and caregiver alongside of his great friend Dave, and maybe better known as Carl. One thing I'll never forget about him is the love that he carried for his amazing friends, some of which were his support system and some he just recalled memories with. Although he may not have remembered some of you by face, within the last years of his life, he did remember your hearts and the part you played throughout his journey. Phil was one of the most unique and witty people that I've ever met. Despite all that took place in his life, he remained caring, funny, and full of wonder and curiosity. Sorry. He loved his 2 cats dearly, and thanks to them, he rarely ever slept alone. Carl and I actually used to joke about the female cat he had, Maisie, being his guardian cat, because she followed him everywhere.
Which he called his dog.
Yeah, dogs. When I first came there, I was looking for dogs because he told me that, we have to make sure the dogs don't get out, and I soon realized that they were cats. He was an incredibly grateful man, and I'm very fortunate to have spent the time that I did with him. Rest easy, my friend. I hope the ice cream and classical music are even better where you are. That was another thing is Phil loved classical music. The last, 2.5 months, he would sob to Beethoven, like it was just the most beautiful sound he ever heard. But yeah, that's about it. I don't know if Mary wants to share anything.
Try.
Now you know why we love Olivia. She was a perfect mate for Phil.
I'm gonna make you fool me.
And I always greeted Olivia when she would come to relieve me. Olivia!
Surprisingly, I missed that.
Okay, so is this how this works? Okay, so I'm Mary, I'm one of the caregivers, a little bit closer, okay. One of the caregivers that got to work with Phil over the last 7 years in home health, and the memories that I just loved coming to visit him. It was always filled with granola and lots of bananas in the morning, of course a good cup of coffee. But every session that we had together was, for nursing visits, but it was always about the latest topic and his friends, who he loved very much. But he would always, we'd get onto some topic that would he would share all of his information, and it would be hard to get him back on track. My job is to focus on him, and we would be focusing on what was ever on his mind, but he was very good at debating, for sure. There was definitely times that I just had to leave.
And very good at litigating.
Of course, Phil and I shared a love of bikes, so that was often a topic that we spoke about a lot. And he definitely told me about all the angles on the bike and how to turn it properly. But really felt lucky to work with him. He was just a wonderful man.
An Olympian cyclist for New Zealand.
Which is amazing considering she didn't know how to turn a bike. So now, should we just open it up?
Yeah, yes, and then I have some people's things to read, but
Oh, I had one thing about, does anybody want to know the most humiliating thing that happened in Phil's life? Well, he had humiliating things, so he got to mention it. But, I had loose juice, and we do the art fair, right, and sell lemonade up there. And Phil worked 1 year with me, and he said, God, you could make 4 times as much money. I said, how? He says, we got to put a tank on a tower and run a hose from it down and to fill the cups. And that was Phil's Tower of Powers. Well, Phil's Tower of Power led to his public humiliation because the tank had a lid on it. And you would fill it with like 5-gallon pail of lemon juice. Anyways, he forgot about the lid. And he got half of the lemon juice on top of his head. And then to add further humiliation, was me hosing him down in public. It did not work the next day art fair for me. Anybody got a memory?
You can come up here or stay seated.
I got this. Speaking of pouring things over things, I don't know if anyone else from the Carpe was going to say this, but he would routinely pour coffee through the water through the coffee thing twice, so we'd have these huge puddles. Just with a brain like his, it just didn't work for everything. This is Leslie.
Yes, I don't think Phil and I overlapped working here, but we saw each other here frequently. But as Phil was getting older, he was eccentric. And I was shopping at Festival one day.
I love this story.
And I'm in line checking out, and the girl who's begging goes, "Oh, that over there, that's the dude." And if you know the Big Lebowski, they were referring to that. Well, I look over, and it's Phil. And he's got a bathrobe on, he's got a pair of shorts on, he's got a t-shirt. He wasn't drinking out of the milk, or the creamer, but he had surgical socks on that were up to his knees and a pair of sandals. And I looked over and I went, "Hi, Phil, how you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, hi, Leslie." And the girl at the counter went, "Oh." She was so embarrassed because I knew who the dude was. But yeah, that's a funny story. And then the other one I was going to tell you is that I came down here one night, or I think I might have been working, and Phil was sitting at the bar, and somehow we got on the subject of math. And I said, "Look, I never understood algebra." He goes, "Oh, well, I'll teach you." And he sits there trying to teach me algebra at the bar. And evidently, he did the same thing with Dennis. So
He taught everybody that.
Yeah, cultured Satch, he's cultured Savannah.
yeah, I was like, I didn't get it in high school, I didn't get it in college, so there's no way, Phil, you're going to teach me at a bar. Anyway, that's it. I loved Phil. He was a fabulous human being.
Anybody else want to come up or stay seated and let's bring this? Okay. You can use this one or
I got my glasses on, I can't take the steps so well. I brought something today, and you're gonna hold it for a bit. I get to
You'll
tell.
explain who you are.
Thank you. I'm Mary Kay Baum, and I took this photo of a great blue heron. And you don't have to keep holding it. I learned that great blue herons always form a rookery. And the reason is, here in Wisconsin, during the summer, and they go back to the same rookery, and they even go back to the kind of tree that they were in before, not necessarily the very same tree or not, and they take turns guarding the rookery. So when there are the new nests, it might just be eggs in them, or it could be little fledglings, you know, and the parents are out, and they go after mostly fish, but other some critters, some large insects and different things like that. And it takes them all day, you know, to do that. But there's always a guarding fish. Excuse me, bird. Yes, heron. And they, in other words, as they grow up, they learn this, and it continues generation after generation. And when I think of Phil, and frankly, when I think of this man, I think of, and the helpers just heard from, that's what community is. And that is how we build community, is we are caring for each other. It's automatic for us. We learned it, hopefully we learned it from our parents or the people we grew up with. And that's why I brought the great blue heron as a reminder that that's still our jobs. And Phil has helped us learn that. When I was running for mayor, I counted on Phil. I didn't know he was going to be so good at this. He would write up, we'd talk about our positions on different things, and they were always, you know, similar. But to prepare them in a way so they were understood and appreciated by the people that we were even either on television or in, you know, big meetings or one-on-one. I would have the words to say things in a way that was understood quickly and in a few words. And he did that for lots of people. You did that picture of me and then people in front of the Capitol. He is hardly noticed in there, but he was the word formation person. He helped us in that way, and most people wouldn't know that, and that is so instrumental for making change. Now I have to tell you some things that I don't know if any of you know this. The day after I lost the election, I had to return some things or something to that same place you were living, Francis Court. And so I got there in the middle of the day or something, and because none of us were up early that night. And he said what he wanted to do, and he's so believable that, you know, that when he says something, he wanted to get on the motorcycle with me behind him, and we would raced around the cat, you know, and up at the square and just, you know, sort of like F you kind of thing. And I convinced him, you know, I'm sorry, I can't do it. You don't have an extra helmet, you know, and so I'm not. But anyway, there's just the full of fun and just I think we can all learn from things he did. I can't leave without saying one more thing, and that is I've known many veterans from Vietnam, and of course we were on the streets here ourselves. And I knew slightly while we were working together that he had been in the army or something, but I didn't know what he went through. And I think for the group it would be helpful if you explain that.
Yeah, I don't know how many people know this, but Phil was in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War, and he was on the USS Ingra destroyer, worked Saigon River, Mekong Delta, got into several fights on the destroyer. He worked in the engine room, which, I don't know if you know this, but the engine room is the worst place to be on a destroyer. Hot, dirty, noisy, could drive you crazy, you know, working in an environment like that. But Phil told me that, you know, he had gotten a concussion, you know, on the destroyer because he was in the wrong place when one of the guns went off. And I think that, you know, Phil, you know, became kind of, I know, we didn't really discuss what turned him against the war in any detail, but I did get from Phil that, you know, his destroyer had, you know, habitually, like any boat that got close to the destroyer, they would just blow it out of the water. And you could see that there was, you know, families of Vietnamese in the boats. It was just, to the destroyer, it was just a security issue. And I think I kind of think that that's what really turned him against the war.
Thank you. Seemed like, I mean, I have relatives who were ordered not to return fire, and they were in Laos or, you know, where we weren't, right? You know, and are to this day are suffering from, you know, they hear something that's like a gunshot or something that could be that, they're on the ground. And their life is permanently impacted and when we think about what we're in right now, and the people dying from lack of food and so forth, we have to have to work for justice but the other thing, and this is related, and I'm not going to read these pages. They're 10 sheets of the same thing, and it is, you know, both my children are Native, and my husband George is here, is Oneida, and thank you, George. And the next, the film that's out right now needs to be seen by more people. It's called The Bad River, and it's named after the Bad River Band of Ojibwe, Lake Superior Ojibwe, and it impacts all of us. The fact that the way that the mining and the pipelines and the way money is so much of our existence instead of people, which reminds me of what someone reminded me of today, what Jim the Professor Grasscamp, his quote was, "We should be building for people, not for profit." And anyway, and this is all interrelated. And so if what happens farther north impacts us directly. And there's a lot, the majority of people in Wisconsin will not get to see this movie unless we get it out there. And that means we should be, it's almost out of the regular movie places now. Now it takes, there are ways to see it at home. It'll be interrupted, but you can also, we can get groups, all kinds of civic groups, libraries, all kinds of groups should be renting this and having free chances for people to come see it. And I just want, you all belong to some organization or another. A couple organizations together can get the $1,500 to rent the movie, and the conservation groups would be very interested in doing this, but we need more groups to actually, so it gets out there to more people. It's a technique we didn't use back in the day. We didn't have movies to show people, and this is so well done, and so genuine. So I will give Jim that, and I'll put a bunch of these on the table so you can.
I say put it on YouTube. Anybody else watch YouTube all the time? But that's the way to reach a wider audience. But other people, come on, there's juicy stories here. Paul? That's Paul Riley.
Well, I don't have any juicy stories.
Come on.
My name is Paul Riley. I met Phil in the early mid-70s when he became an assistant mayor sergeant. And Phil and I worked on a lot of projects together. And he was the idea man, always full of ideas. And I had to be Mr. Pragmatic because I was the finance guy. But one of the things that always impressed me about Phil was his quiet demeanor and his reliance and usage of logic. As you can imagine, a city like Madison, a lot of the meetings get kind of heated, voices get raised. And one time he asked me to sit in on a meeting with him because a bunch of big landlords wanted to talk about property taxes. And they were complaining about the high property tax